Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Brainstorm on video. I'm Meteorologist Matt Gray. We had a very interesting series of weather events around here over the past week, and so I want to talk about a little bit what happened in Spokane on Thursday night, because we went from basically a snowy day with no real travel problems to major problems because of snow and ice. So let's get on it here and show you what the heck happened, thanks to some great resources provided to me and all of you by the National Weather Service. And boy, some really enlightening stuff. It's some stuff that's very fundamental when you first learn about weather that I don't think is really common knowledge. So let's learn a couple of things. First of all, we had a glaze of ice almost over all the roads in the Spokane area on Thursday night after a day of snow. Now, usually when we have these very icy weather conditions, there's usually a couple of ways that this happens. We have clear skies and wet roads freeze up overnight. We've got some rain that falls onto frozen ground, or we have freezing rain, or we have, which we do get around here sometimes, that freezing fog where the ground is very, very cold. We get some fog and it freezes up. Now, what we ended up having on Thursday was very different. We started off with snow, the roads were good, and then all of a sudden, once we got into the later part of the afternoon, like that, the roads were not. So we had a bit of a flash freeze type situation. Let's go over how this happened and look at the differences between the temperatures on the road, in the road, and temperatures in the atmosphere, because they are different, and the cycle of how they go up and down is different as well. So here's what happens. Road warms and cools up faster and earlier than the air does. And the reason why, and this is the part that kind of blew my mind a little bit when I first learned about it, is that the sunlight, it's not heating up the air. It heats up the ground first, and then as the ground warms up, it heats the air above it. That is why a lot of times it's 2 or 3 in the afternoon where we have our warmest temperature, as opposed to when there's the most energy from the sun, which is around noon. So our roads warm up to be their warmest around noon. There's a delay for that heating to work into the atmosphere, and then as things cool down, the roads are going to cool down quicker as well, and they will end up being colder. Roads are going to be warmer as well in the afternoon too. And so it is that cycle, the more extreme and earlier in the day cycle of road temperatures and really ground temperatures, is the reason why we had this problem as we went into Thursday night with icy roads. So let's look at a couple of scenarios here. First of all, let's start off with what we started the day off with on Thursday, which was our road temperatures, or at least in some areas of the higher elevations. Road temperatures less than 32 degrees. The air temperatures are less than 32 degrees. And so the snow falls, it collects on the road. You got to be careful, because as you drive over, as multiple cars drive over, they'll compact that snow down into ice as time goes on. But it's definitely something that you need to be cautious with, but it is not a full sheet of ice. It's not a hockey rink out there. And it is certainly manageable for most of the cars. Most of you are probably driving around here. After all, we got to prepare for winter. We know what we're doing. It's not like we just woke up yesterday and all forget how to drive in the snow. Well, maybe the first day, but you get what I'm saying. Now, here is the other situation. This is actually what we ended up seeing as we started off the day on Thursday. So middle of the day on Thursday, the road temperatures had gotten above 32 degrees. They were about 33, 34, 35. Meanwhile, hey, the atmosphere still below freezing. It was still cold enough for snow, so snow would fall on the roads. It would sit on the roads for a little bit. It would melt, and now we have a bunch of wet roads around the area. Wet and slushy roads, they're pretty easy to drive in, and we're pretty used to that. The issue becomes what happens when it starts to cool down. Here's what happens. Our road temp is above 32. We have wet roads. And now, all of a sudden, the temperatures drop and the road temperatures drop. Well, that's when you get that flash freezing. That's when you get that glaze of ice that seems to come out of nowhere, and that was the big problem. The big problem that we ended up having on Thursday, and it is not going to be the last time this winter that we see that sort of situation. You know, the elevation profiles and where the Spokane area sits geographically makes it an unfortunate candidate for a lot of these situations to happen as we go through the wintertime. So just something to keep in mind every time we're around that freezing point, that 32. So if we're going back and forth in the 30s, then we got to be careful and looking out on the roads, because if we were sitting in the 20s all day, wouldn't be that big of a problem. If we were sitting above freezing all day, wouldn't be a problem. But that back and forth and the melting and the freezing, that's what causes those big problems. So look at this. This is provided to us by WSDOT and the National Weather Service. And look what happens here. This is at I-90, the Perry Curves. Look what happens here on Thursday evening. So the road temperatures were above freezing for most of the daylight hours, gradually cooling, and just as they get about around 32, all of a sudden there's just a massive drop. Cooler air comes in, everything freezes up to ice. Now all of a sudden the road is very insulated from what's going on above it. And so you can literally see on the graph how we went from a pretty easy, no big deal snowy day to an icy disaster around the Spokane area. So something that we're going to be looking for and making sure that you know about as we go through the rest of this winter. Something you need to know about as well. You actually need to be more careful if temperatures are hovering right around that freezing mark, as opposed to if we're staying the whole day cooler or the whole day warmer than freezing. So that is it for today's video brainstorm. Thank you for watching. If you want to get more local news for the Inland Northwest, if you want to have updates on your weather forecast, if you want to see more science-y weather videos like this, go ahead, hit that subscribe button on the 4 News Now YouTube page, and we will be back next week, Christmas week, to talk more about cool stuff like this, stuff that you can use as far as the weather goes in your everyday life. Have a great rest of your weekend. Have a great week. And if we don't see you again, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.